Super Crackers is following an Excel course, and there he needs to add numbers together that match certain criteria. Now, intuitively, you would do this with the sumifs function, and that is indeed what he's trying to do. Unfortunately, that is returning a value error. I try to recreate his problem here in Excel. So we have unit names, then we have a certain ID, and then we have some months. And so for each of those combinations, we get a certain sales number or a different kind of number. Now, what we're trying to do is to add all those numbers together that match these three criteria. So a given name, a given ID, and then a given date. Let's try and do this with a sumif function. What a sumif function allows us to do is to specify a range where we want to add numbers together if they match a given criteria. Now, the first argument to a sumif function would be the criteria range. So in this example, let's take the ID. So this ID must match the ID we have provided here down below. If that's the case, then sum all the corresponding numbers in those rows. I close the parentheses and press enter, and you can see we actually get a result. So this works good. Now, the issue arises if we want to add multiple conditions. And for that, we will need to alter our function to use a sumifs function. Now, the advantage of using a sumifs function is that it allows you to have multiple criteria as opposed to one like we had earlier. Now, the structure of the function is a little bit different. With these sumifs functions, we first must define the range that we want to sum. So in this case, that is this table with all of these numbers. Then we can define a criteria. For example, the ID needs to equal 1. So in essence, we've done exactly the same thing as we did with the sumif function, and you would indeed expect the same result. However, when we press enter, we do indeed get a value error. The reason why that's happening is that the sumifs function cannot handle these 2D ranges. So if we would change the sum area just to include one column and now press enter, that actually does work. So unfortunately, the sumifs function is not a viable solution in this case. There's multiple ways how we could solve this issue. What I propose is a combination of filter functions and then adding the numbers that the filter function returns. So let's start by writing a filter function. And so the first filter function will take in all of these numbers, and we only want to keep the numbers that match the criteria for unit and ID. So we go to the second argument of the filter function. Now we can apply certain filters, and only those items that match all of these filters will be kept. So it's like using an AND condition if we were doing this in an if statement. So the first condition is that this column A containing the name must be equal to the name that we have provided. Now we put this in between parentheses like that. Now if we want to add a new filter, then we simply multiply the previous filter with a new filter. Now how this works, each filter will return either true or false for a given row. And so a true would equal a 1 and a false would equal a 0. And so when we are multiplying something with a 0, we always get 0, meaning it will not get included. So only those rows matching all of the criteria will be included. So to provide the second condition, we select this range in column B and say this needs to be equal to the ID that we have provided. Now I make sure to close the parentheses and press enter. As you can see, what is being returned are the rows that match both conditions. So the name must be UTIC and the ID must be 1. So those rows or the numbers of those rows are being returned. Very good. Now we filtered on a horizontal level. Now we would also like to filter vertically. So we only keep certain columns. Now we cannot do that in the same filter function. So we need to wrap the result of this existing filter function in another filter function. So let's do that. So we add another filter function. And so what are we going to filter? Well, the results of the previous filter function. So now we jump all the way to the end and we add a comma to go to the second argument. So what do we wish to include of the results of the previous filter function? Well, it is those results where the month, so this is the range in row 1, matches the month that we have provided. Now I close the parentheses and press enter. And so what we're getting is those values that match the month. So this 445 and this 2047 indeed in the month of October. Now, all that's left to do is to simply add these numbers together with a simple sum function. As you can see, that gives us the desired result. So Excel is not really cooperating here with the sumifs functions. It's returning an error even though you would not suspect it, and even though we've shown that it does work with this sumif function if you only have one condition. So it is a bit annoying that we have to use this workaround, but as you can see, it provides the correct results. And once you know how to work with these filter functions, they can be very powerful to really drill down your data to exactly what you need.